of the Town of Sunset Beach Planning Board. Is anyone would recommend any changes to the agenda?
Nope.
Okay, we're fine with it. All right, let's recite the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do we have any public comments? We do have a individual in the back, I believe. No comments? Okay. Next item then would be a consideration of approval of our minutes from the August 20th meeting. I personally just saw one minor typo, Cindy, on page 2, about halfway down, where we're referencing spacing of canopy trees. The plan called for 50-foot centers, not 54-foot. Okay. And that was the only thing I had. Does anyone have anything else?
No.
You done good.
If not, then I'll make a motion that we approve these minutes with that one minor correction. Do I have a second?
I'll second, whatever.
All in favor?
Aye.
We have nothing under old business. Under new business, future text amendment discussion. I had requested or added to our planning board list of apartments, a review to our list of planning board projects, a review of apartments following the couple of meetings that we had with Artesia Village, and a lot of comments that we heard from the public, many of which were focused on compatibility with the land use plan. Todd has very nicely clarified the point that we cannot view apartments as anything other than a form of multi-family development. The state does not recognize anything other than multifamily, nor does the town in any of our documents or codes. So let's just accept the fact we're going to talk about multifamily, not apartments in particular. I've gone through the UDO. The land use plan, the 2017 land use plan. And while it clearly does have provisions for multifamily, I think it leans more heavily towards lower density, single family development. So what I'd like to do, if you would just indulge me for about 10 or 15 minutes, let me just go through a few things that I've picked out of the land use plan, and let's see where we might take it. To start, the land use plan was developed based on a survey that went out to our public, not necessarily residents. I think it was pretty much open for anybody who would like to offer some comments. And we had what at the time we viewed as a pretty reasonable response. More than 900 people had responded. But amongst the many questions were, first of all, what type of development should be encouraged on the island and also on the mainland? And if you look at the responses to development on the island, 86% of the respondents said that multifamily should be discouraged on the island. 76% favored single family, or said at least we'd encourage single family, and about a quarter of the respondents said that they would encourage duplexes. So we obviously had a number of people, the vast majority of people, who thought we should discourage multifamily. However, we do allow multifamily on the island today. If we look at that same question in regard to the mainland, 88% of respondents encouraged single family, just over a third supported multifamily, and a greater number, almost half of respondents, discouraged multifamily development even on the mainland. From there, I'd just like to read just a small portion of the vision statement that was generated, which says in part, the town of Sunset Beach intends to promote and support the orderly economic and aesthetic growth and development of the community in accordance with its adopted land use plan and development-related ordinances. The town of Sunset Beach desires to maintain its unique coastal town characteristics by promoting lower density and single-family residential development as its primary growth pattern. We went on in the development of the land use plan to a series of compatibility statements. And if we look at compatibility statement number 14, types of development to be encouraged, it reads A, Sunset Beach desires that all development be designed in place as to be compatible with its existing coastal town and residential characteristics. B, the UDO shall support the existing growth patterns which limit height and density. C, to protect the community from adverse development and growth, the town and staff policymakers will consider these factors when reviewing development plans. Item 2 was capacity of environment. Item 3, compatibility of land use with goals and objectives of the town. 4, density of development. And 5, capacity of community services. Compatibility state 16, types, density, and location of anticipated residential development. The town encourages both development and preservation of a variety of housing types to meet the needs and desires of current and future citizens. Goes on to define a little more clearly Section C, protection of single-family areas. The town shall maintain areas exclusively for conventional single-family dwellings, and goes on to say the town shall retain and maintain the predominantly single-family residential character of the island. It moves on then to multifamily areas. The town shall allow multifamily development in designated and appropriate areas within the golf course-oriented developments and as permitted in MR3, MB1, and BB1 commercial districts. The town shall require that all multifamily developments be approved through the special use permit process. And the last compatibility statement that I'd like to mention is number 26, density of future multifamily developments, which says to assist in protecting its existing community character, scale, and infrastructure capabilities, town policy shall be to consider reducing the density for multifamily structures below a gross of 21.7 units per acre. If we move next to the Chapter 9, which is the future land use classification map and guidelines. Page 9.3 is for mixed use. It points to as desired uses, commercial, upper story residential, and vertical mixed use. Points as an inappropriate use, standalone residential development, and has as implementation considerations prohibiting standalone multifamily residential development in favor of upper story residential in a vertical mixed-use structure. Page 9.4, which deals with island commercial, points to a very different goal than we've ever been able to achieve. And I think without question, we've never been able to develop a strong commercial base in that area because there's just not a population to support it. So it points heavily towards commercial use and two-story development with the ground floor being commercial, the upper story perhaps offering some residential use. So vertical mixed use, the same as we have in the mixed use development area. Inappropriate use, standalone residential development, implementation consideration, reducing our parking requirements, and inclusion of mixed use and or upper story residential as permitted or special use with supplemental regulations and design standards. Page 9.6 deals with high-density residential. Limited options for high-density residential housing are included on the future land use classification map. The town desires to maintain low-density development in order to protect and enhance water quality while also maintaining its existing character. Buffering and landscape materials should be utilized when high-density residential development abuts single-family residential uses. It does acknowledge as a desired use multifamily residential uses and lists as implementation consideration buffering, as I just mentioned, provisions for open space, and establishment of a new zoning district for multifamily residential uses / high-density residential uses only, and or conditional standards and supplemental regulations to address this use. Lastly, medium density residential, 9.7. Intent is to protect existing single-family residential neighborhoods on the mainland. Duplex and townhouse developments are allowed within this land use category, but should be developed in a compact nature that conserves land and promotes open space. Duplexes and townhouses should not encroach upon predominantly single-family neighborhoods. It shows its desired uses: single-family residential, two-family residential, and townhouse development. And again, talks in regards to implementation, buffering, open space, and establishment of a new zoning district for single-family residential uses only. So that, I think, gives us a good deal to think about. I guess the challenge is, or the thought is to discuss, how our current codes line up with the land use plan and what, if anything, we should be considering to do differently. And I think if you glean from some of the information that was in the land use plan, I think there's a number of things we could possibly do to consider. Perhaps making some changes for the potential of multifamily on the island. Prohibiting standalone multifamily residential development in MB1, MB2, or the mixed-use district. Reduce allowable density for multifamily below 21.7 units per acre establish new zoning districts on the mainland to isolate multifamily, and increase open space requirements for areas allowing multifamily. Thank you for indulging me.
Yeah, all very well said. All very well said. Alan, is this mic on? Hello, hello. Okay, all right, perfect. Let me just follow up to note that all the subdivisions that we have recently approved do fall into the areas under the land use plan that meet the requirements of the land use plan. So the densities that you're seeing out there, for the most part, in all honesty, if you compare it to the land use plan, are well
Yep.
beneath what a developer could come in and do. And 21.7 units per acre. I'm not 100% sure where that number came from during the land use plan, but that's really high.
It's dense, yeah.
I just sent a memo over to the town council for their discussion on the UDO for Tuesday, basically telling them they shouldn't have anything over 10 units per acre. In all honesty, I mean, you're talking 4 acres, 40 units, that's really plenty. I don't think any of the zoning districts per se are out of line, and I'm just kind of summing up what I sent to the town council. In my opinion, Sea Trail is probably developing the way it was intended to develop. You'll probably see some of those projects come back to life that were originally proposed. You know, I mean, it is a golf course, a 3 golf course community with a convention center. The whole purpose of that subdivision is to support those golf courses and that convention center. And ideally, we'll see that convention center come back. So I want to make sure I put that out there, you know, and I think with the new ownership group that has that now, I think their intention is to, from our discussions that we've had with them here, is to just basically recreate, not to go outside the box too much from what was originally intended for that subdivision. And along those lines, they just recently, their engineering firm reached out to get a copy of was it the 2006 approval for Discovery Lakes Village 1, which is over there off of Old Georgetown Road. When you turn in off of Old Georgetown, it'd be the vacant property on the right. And that was originally approved for 5 or 6 multifamily buildings there. Relatively lowish density, if you will, considering, you know, like, my mind's blanking me, whatever's adjacent to the convention center, that multifamily. It's nothing like that. And then, of course, you'll see more stuff like we approved last month, like Bird's Watch and things of that nature, and you know, things that are just going to feed that neighborhood along the original intent of that development. I think lowering the density to the 10 units per acre is where you want to go. I think reducing height possibly for multifamily would help in that regard to reduce the visual impacts that, you know, that some folks definitely have concerns about. That being said, you know, there's a give and take that probably needs to be discussed as we talked about ordinance, because, you know, they might get that extra floor going this way, but the question is, do we want them also going out that way? So we have to look at, you know, the cost-benefit ratios that are going on there, and what we're giving up possibly in amounts of green space, parking lots, things of that nature, how we work all that.
Do that in conjunction with open space,
Yes, sir.
however, and then, you know, maybe you have a...
Yeah, I think the land use plan numbers are definitely out of whack. That's for sure. I would think one of the other recommendations that I sent over to the council was the ETJ possibly needing to be fully rezoned. That's basically I mean, granted, that was originally laid out for, I want to say the original plans for all of Angel's Trace was 1,500 lots when it was originally brought through years ago. But that land is vacant now. It's not going to be a 1,700 lot, 1,500 lot subdivision. It's in the ETJ. We probably should do a mass rezoning on that and not let it be our most liberal zoning district. Like I said, C-Trail, MR3, perfect. It's established. It's what it's meant to be. The ETJ, Saunders, mostly Mark Saunders property, probably should be a much lower density zoning district. If they want to do something different, they're always welcome to come back, ask for a rezoning, maybe a conditional zoning of some sort, and present a better plan to us. Because right now it's MR3. Come on, we don't have a whole tide. If they come in with 21.7 units per acre for multi, or is it 17.4 there? Anyway, the high density stuff, we're obligated to do it. They could do the entire ETJ and multifamily if they wanted to. We've been very lucky that all these projects that have come through have not been high density projects based on the zoning. If we were closer to Wilmington, I suspect they'd all be apartment complexes right now. But fortunately, that's not the market. That's not the market here. But I think we're leaving ourselves, the town, open to less than desired land uses in that ETJ, which is basically the only vacant land we have left at this point. Another point to consider as we talk about multifamily is, yes, the land use plan, there was not a lot of support for multifamily, but we need to make sure that we do leave the door open for the opportunity for transitional housing. It's great. People retire here to great single family houses. They make friends, they join organizations, they volunteer for their town, play golf at the golf courses, lots of friends, lifetime friends. We need to make sure that there's an opportunity for them to stay here when they can't maintain, when they lose a spouse, when they aren't able to fully maintain that single family property on a 25,000 square foot lot, in one of our mainland subdivisions or something like that. Where they can stay with their unit, their friends and family in the area. So we don't want to completely shut the door on multifamily, and just something to consider as we discuss it. Obviously, like we talked about, and I'll just, Tom mentioned it, but, income levels, we can't worry about that, and ownership and stuff like that. But we certainly want to make sure that we have the ability to have the transitional housing for our community moving forward, because I think that is a huge need for Sunset Beach right now. And my understanding, honestly, is that was some of the intent of the MUD district originally when it was first planned, was because I guess where Arteza Village is right now, that was 10 more condo buildings over there at one time, and the idea was for it to be, you can sell your house in C-Trail and you can buy yourself a unit over here, and now you're walkable to all the shops and restaurants, and you can stay with your friends and everything in the community, and that's my understanding of what the intent is, and it makes sense. Unfortunately, the bust of 2008 kind of threw a monkey wrench in all the best plans that are out there. And then I'll circle back around to one of my, I brought this up in the past. I think form-based code this is the perfect town for a form-based code. Whether it be utilizing it in just the commercial corridor, our vacant land, you don't have to necessarily let it run free for the entire town, but using a form-based code to ensure that pretty much everything you talked about in the land use plan, the mixed use buildings, we're basically talking about form over anything else. What do we want the town to look like? Do we really care if there's a barber shop in there or a wine tasting shop? Not really. We just want to make sure that the building is beautiful, it's functional, it's a successful place for a business to operate, Um, and that all the public space is there, that all the walkability is there, and then that it becomes a true asset to the community. I think we can tweak the ordinance, and this is me, now I'm getting a little preachy, but we can tweak the ordinance. There's lots of things we can do to tweak the ordinance as kind of a stopgap and enhance what we have. But I think the long-term play is really going after that form-based code. It's going to be, if you look at the communities that do it in North Carolina and, you know, in South Carolina, it's the communities that most of our folks came from. Traditional zoning ordinances are, they don't give you the flexibility, they don't give the developers the opportunity to do something different. I mean, you're basically telling them, lot and block this vacant land out, drop a bunch of multifamily in there, and go at it. But if you look at the towns that do some sort of form-based code, you're talking about all your Lake Norman communities outside of Charlotte. You're talking about Beaufort, South Carolina, town of Cary, Chapel Hill. You know, these are the kinds of towns, I think, from my understanding from talking to citizens here in Sunset Beach, that generally speaking, that's what they're shooting for. That kind of feel. They want to live in a community like that. And I think this town has the personality and the cachet, if you will, to do something unique in southeastern North Carolina, because nobody's really doing form-based code. I think Wilmington's been kind of talking about it. But Sunset Boulevard's a vacant canvas. The ETJ is a vacant canvas. You know, I mean, you get a good plan together, develop a form-based code, and it takes all the worry to a certain degree. I mean, new development's always going to make people uncomfortable to a certain degree, and but if you can set a good plan in place, and you'll know that regardless of what builder comes in, regardless of what use is going in there to a certain degree, you're going to get exactly what you want for the community. And I think that's what this is all boiling down to, which is the original intent of the Village at Sunset. You know, that was a fully encapsulated, basically form-based plan, if you will, and you know, the economy got in its way. And we just don't have the tools in our toolbox currently as we speak to ensure that things stay 100% on course, because we just have a standard, you know, UDO and zoning code. Don, you might have more thoughts on form-based codes and.
No, not really. I'm retired.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Well, I do have some thoughts in a moment I want to share, but
That's what I've got right now. I just wanted to let you know that I Tuesday at the council meeting, I will be talking to the council about the UDO. So anything you guys can throw at me today is going to be useful for me when I speak to the council on Tuesday and seek some of their guidance as to where they want us to go. So beyond what we're talking about specifically here today, you know, the whole kit and caboodle is useful for me on Tuesday, if you will. Anyway. Don?
well, yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple things. One, I neglected to mention at the onset that I need to be excused at a little after 10. I've got an appointment to get my car worked on at Ocean City Chevy at 10:30, so I need to do that. But just a couple things. Some of y'all may know I'm working as a census taker for the Census Bureau, and most of my work has been here in Sunset Beach. I've worked a little bit in Ocean Isle. And one of the things I've noticed about the multifamily units, whether they be here on High Market or down at one at the base of Park, and actually the one that's 6 or 7 story building over maybe in Ocean Isle Beach's territory, is that so many of the units are seasonal. I've gone time and time again, or asked neighbors, I said, well, they only come down 3 or 4 weeks out of the year, or yeah, they're only here in the winter. Oh, I haven't seen those folks in 6 months, blah, blah, blah. So I say that to make the point that it's not like a college town or downtown Wilmington where virtually every unit's full all the time. So that would impact the traffic, among other things. And if you'll drive down past one of these units today, like High Market, for example, those units over there, you don't see very many cars there. So that's a clue to me. Now, how you figure all that in is beyond me. But it's a little bit of a different can of worms. When people think apartments, you know, oh my gosh, there's going to be all this traffic and da 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 da. So I'll just toss that out. Yeah, it's a little bit different can of worms, a little bit different thing than a lot of communities have.
Couple comments, or some comments. So when I got this thing, I started studying. I guess first of all, in background, I used to own and run multifamily
Right.
projects, so I'm not as negative as against them as some people are, because they do serve a need.
Sure.
Okay, both, as you say, transitional, or you do need people to do things.
Service industry workers.
Yes, so there is a need for it, but of course you want it to look right, be maintained right, et cetera.
Correct.
I'm an engineer, so I'm a numbers guy, so I started looking at some of our numbers. First of all, the first number I looked at was, we define multifamily as 3 or more. So some of what Tom said, I guess maybe cleared up my mind on that, because it seems like there was a thought was, yes, single family is good, and duplexes, not so bad, or should be somewhat encouraged, I think you used the word, but more than 3, discouraged. So I guess there's that question is the 3 number be reconsidered? Or is that a good number, or should it be 2? Clearly, there's single family 1, multifamily technically is anything more than 1, but we've defined it as 3 or more. So is that number the number? Okay. And I can see based on the land use plan maybe why it got there, because there was the encouragement of duplexes in some areas. Then I went back and looking at, of course, not to pick on our Teza Village, but it's been recent in our minds.
Right.
So I drove around there the other day and I said, okay, it don't look so bad. The heights don't seem unusual, the density don't seem bad. It doesn't seem like a bad property. Obviously everything is plus or minus. So I went back to the records of what we got, and looking at the plans, it was a 72 unit building and it covered 49.6%. So that's one item for us to look at. Right now I think you're allowed up to 50% if I read the code right.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that should stay 50% or be lowered down, and how does that work with our 45% stormwater issue on single family? Should it be 45% for consistency's sake? Or does this mean somewhat so different that it can be 50? I'm just throwing things out now.
Yeah, just this generally falls into commercial, and they've already got an existing stormwater plan over there.
Okay.
So it's kind of,
So that, I agree, that's a number we can look at, is how much do we allow to be built on? Whether it's 50-50 the way it is now, or should that be changed to 45-55 or some other number? Then I went to this 21.7 units per acre, and I had figured, since that's not an NRN, a nice round number, I was trying to figure out where it came from, and I couldn't figure anything out on that.
yeah,
And then I looked at our Teza, and they were at 14.5 units per acre. And I said, looking at that property, it's okay, but it should be denser, I don't think, than what it is. It's kind of, to me, at sort of around the practical limit, okay, plus or minus a little bit. So then I'm thinking, what do we define as a unit? We define a unit as any unit. But I wonder, for multifamily, we should change our thinking like that. And I just, for example, said, well, let's say a one bed, because when people think of multifamily, as kind of Don was going at, we're thinking about the number of people, the number of cars, the traffic.
Right.
But describing a unit for a multifamily is not granular enough in my mind. So I took an example. I said, okay, let's say a 1-bedroom unit is 1. A 2-bedroom unit is 1.5 equivalent units, and a 3-bedroom unit is 2 equivalent units. When I applied that math to that project, I got 114 equivalent units. And when I divided it out by their acreage, I got 22.98 equivalent units per acre. And I said, well, that number seems to be about right for what I'm seeing. Property's not done, of course, yet. So I guess throwing out something there that maybe the 21.7 number don't need to be messed with. Maybe it does. That's the only way to do it. Or maybe we think about what a multifamily unit is different than a single family unit in that as the units get bigger or more bedrooms, and I went by bedrooms because the town I had a property in had really strict rules on the number of people and the number of bedrooms, et cetera. I won't get into that now. And how they managed apartments with inspections and how many people could be in them and whatever. They did it by bedrooms. That might be a more fairer way to think about, not fair, but more, I guess, effective way to think about it. Is that a unit just isn't a unit because a 3-bedroom unit obviously could have 6 people in it. And a 1-bedroom unit probably only got 2 people unit. So they're really not the same in the effect on a community, number of people, number of cars, the number of comings and goings, et cetera. So maybe another way to tackle it, and it might be too complicated, is to change units to some sort of equivalent unit. I don't know if we can look at other properties to see how it would have turned out if we used something like that.
Would the state allow something like that, do you think, Todd?
I don't know, that's the
Yeah,
note
I'm just.
Yeah, I don't
thinking
know that
myself.
That's the note I'm writing right now.
How do you define a unit?
Yeah,
Yeah.
What is a unit? To me, a unit.
Because there's clearly a different impact on the unit. I mean,
My hunch, square footage, my hunch, no, definitely can't do square
you
footage.
can't do square footage, I knew that already.
Yeah.
So that's,
My
and
hunch
that's,
is the state, just knowing the state's gonna define a unit as a unit as a unit, whether or not
Right.
it's got 4 bedrooms or half a bedroom,
Well-
even if it's a studio, they're gonna say it's a unit,
but it really doesn't
But
describe
even
the
though
impact
it's not
properly.
gonna use, a
Right.
studio apartment's not gonna use nearly the utilities and be the.
But then
impact on the
again,
community of
but that's
three
kind of like using, then that says, okay, just change that 21.7 to 10 or 11 or whatever you want. But that's using a sledgehammer.
Right.
When I think this approach may be using a smaller hammer and a chisel, because, like you said, for transition housing, maybe some 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom apartments are not so bad. Transitional person, when 3-bedroom apartments are different impact. So,
Right.
I mean,
Right.
I'm just saying, is this an alternative way as opposed to just hitting them with the sledgehammer and saying 21.7 is out, now it's 10? Okay? Because sometimes, of course, we have the option, obviously, to approve more, but there's gonna be a lot of, let's call it the feedback from the community.
Sure.
If we change that number to 10 and then approve one at 12, and it doesn't make a difference whether the 12 was the right number or not, they're gonna be blowback. So I'm just saying, I'm just throwing this out as a possibility of a more granular way to sculpture this without the sledgehammer. I could get into some other zoning issues where I thought seemed kind of odd of what we had in there, but maybe at this point that could be looked at later, depending on where I seen one of them, we allowed only 10 feet between buildings. That seemed low to me, just from a safety standard. I forget which one that was in.
Well, you don't really get into any issues with fire code until you get 5 or less feet. That's where everything gets.
Yeah, it was that E,
that's the island thing.
yeah, like some other thing, well, there's, like say, a few other zoning things.
And we could probably even get into
Yeah, you got 10 feet.
requiring sprinklers. I mean, we can get into some
Well, I mean,
interesting requirements on some of this stuff.
10 feet to get between 2 buildings when there's something bad going on is difficult. And that, it jumped out, it's a couple of places where that E dimension is 10 feet. And that seemed a bit tight in case something's going wrong.
I want to say 10 feet gives you, with the fire code, gives you free reign to do whatever you want. I think it's 10 feet. You start getting under that 10 feet, you have to start getting.
My information told me it was 12. On what,
I could be
but
wrong.
it could
I'm
be
not a
different
building
fire
inspector,
codes
so-
in different states, but I thought 12 was like the distance between buildings that was desirable.
Oh, more is better.
More is better, but I thought the minimum, so it could be my understanding, you know more than I do on this. My understanding was kind of 12, but,
Generally speaking, I want to say it's 10 in North Carolina. I could be wrong. Fire code, like building code, if you put a sprinkler system in your building, they pretty much toss the building code and fire code out the window and you can do whatever you want.
I mean, it's not required.
Well, they're trying to force people, they're trying to mandate fire sprinkler systems, which is the state's building code officials, fire departments. Their preferred method for fire protection is sprinkler systems in buildings. Builders and homeowners will do everything under the sun to avoid putting a sprinkler system in a facility.
Because of the price, or the look, or what reason?
And if it goes wrong.
Oh,
There's a lot of perception and a lot of, and I've had this conversation many times over the past several years, but yes, at one time, sprinkler systems were a real problem. If one head went off, the entire building was a lost cause. Now everything's zonal, you know, one sprinkler, well, we don't have them here, but one sprinkler goes off, it's isolated. Pete, correct me if I'm wrong. If one sprinkler goes off, just that one goes off, you know, so it's an isolated system. On a residential unit, they kind of disappear into the house. It's just a flat white plate on the ceiling. My friends in New Hampshire live in a city that requires them for all residential houses, and you don't even notice that they're in there. But you certainly could pass a local code for multifamily and all commercial buildings that they're required to have that. I don't think it's a big deal personally because they make up their money pretty quick on insurance. I'm a big proponent of it. That's just me, but that's kind of a.
well, in light of the recent fires on the beach towns here after
Right.
whatever the
Might
name of
be a
that
good
storm
idea.
was, it may be something to consider. I wasn't aware of the batteries catching fire thing, and I'm still not fully educated on what happened there in golf carts or cars or
I
whatever.
think it has something to do with the salt.
The salt
Yeah.
water with a battery, but I didn't think a car would do that. I'm not sure if those were not golf carts, but, which don't have the safety provision automobiles have, but, in the electrical system, but, certainly something to think about also.
But on the density, I agree. I personally, from my experience, don't think that Arteza Village density-wise is out of whack for the size property that it is. It
To me,
fits the space nicely for
right.
the type of project that it is.
But looking at their numbers, they were like a third under the allowable.
Correct.
So clearly, if they would have built to the 21.7 or
21.7 is just
right,
outrageous.
so right, so either the sledgehammer, you reduce that number,
21.7 is City of Wilmington numbers. That's what you build downtown Wilmington.
right.
You go
That's
7, 8
not here.
stories high and you drop in a high-density condo unit, you know, or go to Myrtle Beach. These are Myrtle Beach, Wilmington, Charlotte, Raleigh numbers. They're not low-density residential community numbers like you have here in Sunset Beach. So that seems kind of like it was just a canned number that probably came from a consultant, is my guess. But that just, and it's not a big deal. I mean, most developers in our market aren't building that kind of density anyway. They wouldn't consider it. So, you know, aesthetically, what can we do? Separation of buildings, that's absolutely something to look at. Sprinkler systems, like I said, that's something to look at. If we want to talk about fire and safety issues, you know, eliminating pine straw is always a huge thing that fire departments are proponents of too, because pine straw loves to be used in North Carolina, and one cigarette and the whole building can go up quick and in a hurry.
And of course, let's not forget the dumpster issue. Whether we tightened up that code.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to mention a couple points here. Todd made, alluded to the fact that, asked me about form-based zoning. I should point out that I was town planner. I was professional background similar to Todd's. I was planner in Oak Island back in '99 through '01 just after Yopon Beach and Long Beach consolidated, and that was an interesting process. So if you can imagine Sunset and Ocean Isle merging, it was interesting. It actually went better than most people feared until Hurricane Floyd came in that fall. But one of the things that I think is useful to keep in mind, and I live in Windfall, out here, you know where it is, and there's about 12 feet between buildings, 10 to 12 feet, but there's an HVAC unit sitting there on one side or the other, so if the truck needs to get behind the building, they gotta be careful. That's just a thought, and I don't know how you would deal with that, if you deal with it at all. Just a point.
We do deal with it now because our current zoning ordinance, UDO, doesn't allow for those kinds of encroachments into the setback. So in your neighborhood specifically, we run into issues all the time with generators and gas tanks and all that kind of fun stuff. But yeah, there are certainly some, like I said, I don't think in the MUD district specifically we have an issue. I think our issue is in the undeveloped properties. Behind your house is a perfect example. That's zoned for multifamily.
We didn't want to talk about
I know, I know, but you know, there you have a perfectly,
Yeah.
a decently sized vacant tract of land adjacent to a single-family home neighborhood. Fortunately, with the landowner who's probably not doing anything with it anytime soon. But you could certainly, right now, under the ordinance, put in a whole lot of,
Oh, trust me, Dollar
Density.
General looked at that property.
oh boy. So, yeah, there's probably some rezonings that the town needs to go after as a phase one to stave off somebody from just using the zoning ordinance as a, you know, right now, builders know. They're more educated on this kind of stuff than anybody else, as they should. They're making money off of it. They know that property is a use by right, and there's not a single thing anybody in this room can do to prevent them from putting a Dollar General on that piece of property. And you generally don't realize that that's gonna happen until someone does it.
Okay, I need clarification here. I understood when we bought the house that the prior owner had tried, they had to go to the county to try to get that rezoned, and the county wouldn't rezone it. Now you're telling me that's under our purview?
It's in the ETJ.
Huh?
It's in the ETJ, so yes.
I know, but why were they going to the county then?
Could have possibly been before it was in the ETJ. I mean, if you go back, that's it. As it stands today, it's our zoning.
Applies to it, okay.
Yes.
Could have been a
So
mistake.
So yeah, it would be whatever we determine. I'm not sure when the town extended its ETJ to the Calabash River, but yeah. It's Mr. Stanland, so he could have done it 40 years ago, tried to get it rezoned to something else. But that being said, tracts of land like that are a perfect example of what made sense 20, 30, 40 years ago just doesn't make sense in 2020. Nothing makes sense in 2020. But you know, that's more appropriately zoned something else. Like I said, the ETJ properties probably should just be brought back into either some sort of more rural zoning district, if you will, and that rural is the wrong answer, but some sort of very low density. And if somebody really has a project that they want to build, they should have to come before the town and say, hey, I want to rezone this. Or, you know, here's my plan that I'm going to do, that I want to rezone this so it's more dense. I can make this work with the community, you know, with the conditional zoning process. And
What you're saying is like a tract of that, which may be MR3 now?
the one behind her is,
No, it's mixed use.
it's mixed use zoning.
Is this make it MR1?
Correct. MR1 would probably be the perfect zoning district.
Because that's, and then if somebody wants to do something else, then they have to request an adjustment or a relief.
Correct.
To go with something more.
Correct.
When right now, they can do virtually anything they want, and there's really nothing. Even though the townspeople will think we have some way to stop them, we don't.
Yeah, right now, the best tool you have under your belt, honestly, right now, is put a low-density zoning district on something, because most builders don't want to build anything under low density. And there's nothing wrong with coming back to rezonings. I mean, I spent 20 years, basically 17 years, doing rezoning applications because rural agricultural zoning districts with 1 acre minimum lot sizes are, A, nobody wants to buy them, and B, nobody wants to develop them. You know, people aren't interested in taking care of that much land anymore. They barely want to take care of a half acre of land.
Where do you live, if I may ask?
You know where Landing One is? If you're
Oh,
going.
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I live in there,
Okay, gotcha,
and I back that property.
yeah.
And I know several people have looked at it to do things. And I said, MUD, but I think it's either commercial or residential. Now, what would that be? I think that's what I was told in the beginning. It's either or.
It is, because it's the same zoning district that you have up there by Colony 1, I think.
It's MR3,
It's not MR3 because it's red.
MB1. It's MB1.
Yeah.
I'd have to go run and look at the zoning map up there. No one's called about your property, so I haven't given it a super good look, other than I know that it can be not single-family development.
Mr. Chairman, Ron mentioned apartments a moment ago. I lived down in the Tides of Calabash for about a year in a transition from a divorce to getting remarried, and there's definitely a need for apartments like that in this community for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
Many you touched on, transitions, lower income people, what have you, and that's a perfectly fine apartment complex in my mind anyway.
Yeah, if it's developed right, built right,
Yeah.
they're an asset to have because you have people
Sure.
to do things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Service jobs.
So let's
also.
face it, I mean, what is our average age? It was like 66 years old, right? Sunset Beach?
Yeah.
More than that now.
Is it higher now? Or lower? I don't know. The new census will probably tell us. So clearly, some people do things that are probably nice to have.
And they stayed full. They had a waiting list, actually.
But the property, like you say, has to be built properly, maintained properly.
It's well maintained, landscaping and so forth.
So I guess, what do we want to do? I guess what we need maybe is kind of make a priority list of things to look at, or?
Yeah, what I was gonna suggest is perhaps we should wait until after council talks about what next they want us to be looking at, which is gonna come out of the meeting
Right.
Tuesday. Yeah, when I look at what we've been talking about this morning, I think perhaps, thinking of some rezoning and setting up some specific areas for multifamily, higher density might be in order, and especially considering we have, 241 acres of land recently purchased that's going to be developed.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
200.
Whatever the number
221?
was, it was a sizable number.
It's a good
Yeah.
number. Cindy was around when there were a lot of these plans in that neighborhood were actually approved. There's a good number of units in there. I want to say Riptide told me somewhere between 500 and 700 units is what they're shooting for, or what their numbers have told them. But I think they've already had to bring that back.
Let me mention one other thing, mention the service. Did you have a comment?
Do I have what?
Did you have a comment?
Well,
No.
yeah, I was gonna ask him, with these two big developments coming in and everything, how much land is still open for development that's under the purview of Sunset Beach? Are we trying to change everything for a little bit? Because obviously annexation isn't gonna happen.
Here we go. I'll show you in just a second. Ta-da.
Oh,
So, I don't know how many of you all can see it. Would it be easier if I went up here?
I can't see that. Oh, there we
You
go.
got one behind you.
There we go.
Pretty much this entire ETJ is vacant.
Purple?
This purple quadrant right here. Whoop. Get it bigger. Perfect. All this is vacant and has no plans. inside Sandpiper Bay, there's probably as much vacant land in Sandpiper Bay as that was just bought by Riptide in Sea Trail, that's vacant land.
Really?
Uh-huh.
Common areas.
Yeah, this is all vacant, can be developed, that track right there is 4 acres, can be developed, there's a big island piece back here, and there's another piece, back there, and right in this area, for development.
So there is a lot.
There is, and then you have, this track here's empty, here's the track, the red track, yeah, MD1, Greenland. Which probably made sense when they first found it. You know, someone probably thinking about a waterfront restaurant or something like that back there, is my guess. So you have that vacant land, you have a ton of vacant land here on shoreline that has been, some of it's been purchased, some of it, you have the Wayne Island subdivision back there, that's surrounded by Oyster Bay and off Wayne Drive. Good news, the island is done.
You think?
That's good news?
The island is, there are really no more lots that could be subdivided. There might be a little bit that you could do on some of these oceanfront lots, maybe, I don't know, but not really, not really. So your ETJ is honestly your biggest area. This right here, that's the building part. That's already been developed here, now that's H&H homes, and then here's Sunset Ridge. So really, you're talking like here, here.
Okay, but so part of that purple is in the process of being developed.
Yeah, so,
Then with the H&H and the Bill Clark.
yeah, this is the Bill Clark stuff, right here. All this is vacant. And that's a chunk of land. That's a chunk of land. MR3 is probably the worst zoning district for that piece of land to be. It's the best piece of zoning if you want to sell that piece of property. You know, and some of that's going to be, me personally, like I said, I made that recommendation to council. I don't think it's a bad recommendation around here. The planning board, whether or not they want to go toe-to-toe with Mark Saunders is a whole nother discussion level for a mass rezoning of that property, but that's for them to decide.
I think planning wise, it's probably the right move.
Lawsuit wise, that's a whole other story with Mark Saunders.
Todd, is Sunset Ridge in the county or Ocean Isle Beach?
So Sunset Ridge, the single family homes, Brunswick County.
Okay,
The stuff that's right on the main drag,
right.
that's in our ETJ.
They're building like crazy in there. I mean,
Yes,
mile a minute,
yes.
not fast.
And that leads to another point, that one of the things that you really got to think about is, you could shut the building down in Sunset Beach. I mean, just shut it down. Stop building for the next 15 years in just the town limits of what you see on that map, the ETJ, the town limits. We're still going to get overrun with people. Because Ocean Ridge is going gangbusters. There's a new subdivision behind.
You know, you've got Chatham Glen back there, plus all that vacant land is now another
60 townhome units back there, 50 townhome units back there. Yeah, I think the Pearl is shutting down 9 holes to start doing development, I heard. You know, you've got Kingfish Bay that's going as fast as they can, you know, and all these other developments towards Ocean Isle Beach and Calabash that are just,
Little River.
Little River, Carolina Shores, they got the approval for the new apartment complex that the folks who built Arteza Village had applied for. I think I put in some of my weekly reports, the Summerwood Apartments. Did not get funded, so that project's not gonna happen. But it's going into Carolina Shores.
And Sunset Ridge is another one that's a lot of second homes in there, a lot of them.
But
I need to excuse myself, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, oh,
Okay, we'll
thank
see.
you, Don.
thank you, Don.
We'll see you next time. I enjoyed it. I got a lot to learn though.
But yeah, there's a lot of opportunity for development here. And I honestly, if you really look at that map and break down just based on the subdivisions that we've approved in the past year and the number of people that that's bringing into Sunset Beach, you can probably multiply that times 3 or 4 for the amount of available vacant land across the rest of the town. And we're just now really starting to scratch the surface on subdivisions that were subdivided
30, 40 years ago, you know, on the mainland. The mainland's potential is where Mr. LeBruno lives. I mean, I think he's gonna start seeing, based on the amount of survey stakes that are been out there the past 6 months to a year,
The most, that's the good part. The most worrying part I have as the HOA or the POA is a number of people calling me. I think I've gotten a number of buzzes today. Is people that want to buy a number of tracts and build rental properties.
Where do you live?
Ocean Harbor, West End. I
That's
mean,
what the
a house just to Airbnb them. So we're developing a rental policy, and the POA, we're gonna have to amend our covenants, which is gonna take a while, because I've had at least two, and I think I got your guy calling me today, wanting to know what he can do. Do we have, so they would buy and put up houses or duplexes, which I think is not allowed, because we're MR1.
yeah, you can't put a duplex in there.
Just as to rent, Airbnb.
Yeah.
It's certainly an emerging issue, because there aren't enough, people can't afford to buy homes, you know, and, or they just want to be able to, those who can afford to build a home and take advantage of, the rental rates right now are through the roof. If you've got multiple properties, you're living the dream right now. So
As long as you got internet access, they'll rent it for.
exactly,
Right.
exactly. So really, what does this all mean? I honestly don't think that the projects that we've seen are out of line. I think we've dodged a few bullets, you know, per se. Obviously, these Bill Clark, H&H Homes, they know what they can put on that property. They've read our ordinances, they've read our land use plan. They know that they could come in there and stack it full of multifamily. Fortunately for us, that's not our market. That's not who they're marketing towards. That's not who's trying to buy it. We just need to look at things in the ordinance that prevent the one unscrupulous builder or the one take advantage builder, if you will, who wants to exploit the weak points, if you will, of a local ordinance.
Or they could carve out a piece of property and sell it to somebody that wants to do that, right?
Right.
They can own a large tract that they're just happy putting up nice single-family home. They could carve out a chunk that allows someone to put a pretty dense property in
Yes.
behind it or something.
Yes.
And what do they care at that point? They can sell that property for a nice chunk of change to somebody, 'cause even though they may not want to do it, they can
Times
move it
change,
along
too.
to somebody at a nice
Yeah,
profit.
markets change.
Times
Right,
change, so,
right.
you know, we gotta think
You know,
forward on it.
we have relatively good ordinances. You know, we've done some smart things. Y'all have done smart things over the years with some of the more aesthetic things with lighting, the overlay district here on the mainland. You know, last year with the stormwater ordinance, upgrading the landscaping ordinance, and that's still something we got to bring back with some more updates for that. But a lot of the right moves have been made. But if we really want to go next level, and once you actually, when you really sit down and look at this map and you realize how much we're not built out,
Worrisome.
moving in a direction that, you know, obviously this town is not what it was 20 years ago. You know, its style, its ideal, it is more in line with the more upscale communities in North and South Carolina, and should have the tools in place that fit that and protect that. And I honestly don't believe you can do that with just a general zoning ordinance. I think the real move, I go back to it again, is the form-based code. And, you know, the biggest problem with that is more getting the funding to go that route. But I think it can be explained in a way that's palatable to a council who wants to protect the values and aesthetics of the community. And I mean, that's what we're really talking about here. I mean, we can nickel and dime it and.
So you would be looking at doing that on a chunk of property, applied it?
Yeah.
Say I mean, obviously where it's already developed, you can't change it.
There's really no need for a form-based code here. I mean, this is
Right.
pretty much.
But one of those
This
undeveloped
is lot
areas,
block development, you can't really put any architectural codes on, you can't put any architectural codes on anything on the island. Okay. The island is what the island is for the most part, you know, like you all said, you know, it's gonna be single-family houses. The biggest trend you're gonna see on the island is probably, especially now where price points are getting, if the market stays good and stuff like that, you're gonna see these little H-frame homes or, the smaller bungalows from the sixties and seventies just get knocked down. And you're starting to see that take place. You know, that trend's been going on up and down the coast for years. Doesn't seem like it's been as prevalent here as it has been in some of the other communities, but I've seen a few of them since I've been here as well. You know, but obviously this corridor, you'd want to put some form-based codes into this area. And up, you know, pretty much all of this area. This is where your development's going to take place over the next 20, 30 years. But, you know, you can kind of set the form and set the baseline, and you can really protect what's going on in this community. I mean, eventually, there's a couple goals that you want. You want the commercial. Council's been pretty clear, and the land use plan's been clear that there needs to be some sort of commercial development. The commercial development is going to pay for, it's going to keep the tax rates low. That's the number one goal of having any kind of commercial development. And commercial development doesn't necessarily have to be bad. Commercial development can, I mean, there's a Wings in Nantucket. But you'd never know it when you walk past it.
Yeah.
A little sign about this big, it says Wings, and the minute you walk in that door, it's every tchotchke you've ever seen at any store in North and South Carolina. It just says Nantucket on it. You know, you buy a shot glass, and it's the same deal, everywhere else. But from the outside, it looks just like everything you've ever pictured in your head about Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard and places like that. And that's really what the goal is. It's not so much that Wings is there. Wings is always going to be there. They're not going away. But what they look like, Dollar General's not going away. You know, what they look like is the issue. How do they blend into your community? How do they work with your community? You know, when I was working up by Lake Norman, town of Davidson, you're going to get a CVS, but their CVS has 2 floors of offices above it. You know, and we're talking about town of Davidson. I mean, it's a tiny little college town on Lake Norman. I mean, it's nothing special, but they committed to doing that type of zoning, and once they did that, kind of changed their whole future, as opposed to what we have now, where, you know, for the most part, we're lot and block stuff. We got a good architectural code for commercial, very good one in regard to that, but that unique massing of development, if you will, like you see in some of these photos, that would, you know, really get into, are they in this packet? There they are. These 3 photos illustrate beautifully what you can do with, from standard zoning ordinances to the flexibility. And the flexibility, that's a big hurdle. You know, people are used to traditional zoning ordinances that say 25-foot setback, that's all you get, ha ha ha. You know, deal with it. But there's a value of pulling your buildings up to the road or creating these unique spaces. You know, you think about the communities that you like to go vacation at, the places you like to go visit. It's not just McDonald's, CVS, this, you know, just stacked up in a nice little, you know, in a perfect row. They're probably places where they've created unique spaces in the developments. You know, you actually, when you go to get a Happy Meal for your grandkid or something like that, you actually are like, oh, well, I'm underneath a nice shade tree. This isn't a bad little public spot here. You know, they got a fountain developed into the mix. You know, it's a place where you want to spend time. It's where you want the community to congregate. You know, so, you know, when you look at these right now, we're more like this, the way our zoning is laid out. We want to be more like these last 2 drawings, you know. And you can see You can see just the building layouts, there's a little bit more architecture there. You know, we're somewhere in between the two. We haven't done the things with setbacks and public spaces and things of that nature that really are gonna set us apart. You know, you wanna be the coastal leader when it comes to upscale development, you know, and these techniques, they're not just about pushing people out or, you know, it's about the aesthetic. It's about retaining value. It's about enhancing what you've all bought into and making sure that it's 30 years from now, still that same destination. I mean, there's a reason why Devereux and Hilton Head and, you know, places like this are all sought after, you know, Lake Forest. There's a reason why there's places like this are all sought after places for, you know, decades. You know, they put in the time, they put in, you know, Hilton Head's one of the first towns in the country that started doing the architecture and tree protections, and you go down there and you know it, you know, they got their little color wheel in their zoning ordinance and everything is just so, you know, and granted, we're in North Carolina and that leads to a few other challenges, obviously, as far as what we can do, but,
Did you say Cary's downtown, was that form-based you said?
they have
'Cause I've been
elements of,
there, and that's kind of nice.
oh yeah, Cary, yeah, that's like the hardest place in North Carolina to develop. They've got everything up there, for sure, but, yeah, you know, and you've got a desirable community. It doesn't matter what you put in the ordinance, if you've got a desirable community and you can create a desirable community through your ordinances and your land use planning, people are going to want to move there. People are going to spend the money to do whatever it takes to build their neighborhoods there. And Sunset Beach is about 50% of the way there, and it's just a matter of taking it the next step to ensure that every development falls into that category. You know, and that's the key. Lots of vacant land, lots of opportunities to do the right thing. But for every opportunity that there is to do the right thing, somebody's out there looking for the opportunity to do the on the cheap or quick and easy thing to make $1 because they don't live here. You all do. So making those choices is educated choices is important. Public education is huge because I guarantee you most people don't realize how much vacant land's out there. That's every town.
Where do you think the meeting's going to be going on Tuesday, Todd? Do you have a sense of?
I honestly, I don't. I sent out my email and I unfortunately didn't hear back from anybody with any comments, which means they're saving up for me on Tuesday. I would have loved to have had a little more information so I could have shared it with you all, but
You sent something, making some suggestions about? I guess that from what I've seen and just watching some of the council meetings on YouTube, that people are starting to, a number of people are expressing concern about the level of growth in town. And I think council is going to take some steps to wrap our arms around it and have a positive plan for managing growth.
yeah,
And managing growth is a very, very broad subject. You know, we as we get more people, we know we're going to get more commercial development. We know there's going to be more, you know, heavier tax on our infrastructure.
Right.
Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. So, but you don't have a hint at this point as to.
I know that there are several council members that have concerns over multifamily development. Because they've reached out to me in the past. There's obviously, Ms. Harris mentioned, you know, concerns about developing in harmony with the land use plan. There's a real misconception out there that the land use plan is the end-all, be-all document, and we can deny projects based on the land use plan. We can't.
No, you can't.
The land use plan, at least not in North Carolina. I think you can in other states and stuff like that, which is where the confusion runs. But what, in North Carolina, the land use plan is really designed to guide the UDO or zoning
We'd
ordinance.
like to see it, we expect a consistency.
Yeah.
Between the UDO and the land use plan, but.
And some of the items you pointed out and Mr. LeBruno pointed out is the town has changed so much, and no one, I don't think anybody perceived the rapid development that we saw in the past
in
360
2015,
feet.
when we
I
started the
thought
land use
it was
plan.
interesting when you gave the statistics of what the public wanted. Well, it sure isn't what's in there,
Yeah, well, that's true.
you know?
But, you know, you, no public is ever, I don't care where you are, say, can we please have more multifamily? They're not gonna ask for that.
The thing is,
Well,
too,
because it's a
If
misconception.
they
Well,
wonder
'cause
why
everybody
people-
visualizes the bad multifamily,
Correct.
and they don't notice the good ones, just
Mm-hmm.
like, because, well, that's a condo.
We've got some,
And it's the same, but a well-developed, well-planned, well-maintained and owned multifamily apartment complex can look as good or better than a condo can be a mess too, if not managed properly. So-
there is a mobile
Right.
home park in Carmel, California, where you can purchase a single-wide mobile home overlooking the bay over there for $1 million plus. But it's managed like, you know,
Right.
it's been there for 70 years or whatever, you know, it's been there forever, but celebrities buy mobile homes in California because they want that view, which is crazy. But, or seems crazy, I guess it's not crazy, but, you know, it's a perception thing.
Right. It's a perception.
It's no different than the perception between an on-site stick-built home and somebody who builds a modular house. They're the same. They're the same. They're built to the exact same building code. One's built inside a warehouse to the North Carolina Building Code, and one's built on-site to the North Carolina Building Code.
they say the modular ones are built better.
That's what I've had builders tell me too.
You know, you
I
got
owned one, so you know,
better controls. in
my
the
resale
market.
value on the island was just as good. But yeah, there's a lot of challenges out there. The land use plan is definitely out of whack with today's world. The 21.7 units is just, there was nothing happening, I don't think, when this, in 2016, 2017, I think was when,
2015 is when we
started.
started the
Yeah.
whole process, and there was no development.
there was no development.
So we had envisioned that, you know, we looked at what had happened over the preceding 10 years. We thought that's going to continue for the next 10 years.
Right.
And clearly, that was not a good assumption.
You know, and honestly, these plans are your best guess. You know, trends in the market happen. That was really before the baby boomer generation started retiring in mass, you know, and now we are in the absolute throes of it, you know, and that's something to consider for the next decade. That's a ton of people. You know, 2020, now the mass exodus out of the metropolitan areas are going to put an additional group of folks moving to smaller
Beach.
communities. And what, you know,
With internet.
Right. As long as you got internet now, why would you stay in a city?
you know,
If you got a-
ATMC's running hot broadband all over
If
Pender
you
County
got a
right
Zoom,
now.
if you got a Zoom, school, work, and whatever, then you might as well have a nice view of the ocean while you're doing it.
So, and if you think about it, you know, if you've got, your mom and dad have retired to Sunset Beach, and you've got your family living in Manhattan or Chicago or something like that, you're like, well, you know what? Let's get the family out of the city. Let's go get close to grandma and grandpa, or you know, friends and family. You know, they live in Sunset Beach. There's great neighborhoods there. You know, they've built a great community. We love taking the kids to the beach. Mom and dad seem happy there. Yada yada yada. And you know, the school system is wretched, but truth be told, they could be brought back. You know, like anything else. And there's a good chance you're going to start seeing some of that. I took my wife and my daughter to Hotel Ballast in downtown Wilmington. There were 3 families staying there from Manhattan that were just down for the weekend because they were leaving Manhattan to move to North Carolina because of COVID.
Yeah, you hear a lot of that.
Yeah.
A lot, yeah.
A lot of
So-
leaving the city.
And with online schooling, I think is gonna you're not gonna be tied to your local schools anymore. Why, if you're gonna do it online, or whatever you wanna call it now, why would you have to tie into your local teachers? You could pick the best teacher in the country to teach fourth grade math to your kid. I think that, the
Yeah,
school-
no, I
the
don't
schools
disagree.
Are short thinking on what they're doing now, because once you give people an opportunity to choose, they can choose outside of what you think they're gonna choose.
Correct. And what we're learning here and let's be honest, 2020 is a learning curve for all of us as to what the trends are going to be, and things are happening, I like to say 10 to 15 years sooner than they probably would have happened if COVID hadn't taken place. I don't have to have my office in downtown New York anymore. I can work from anywhere. Or I don't have to live in Charlotte anymore. I don't have to live in Raleigh. I can live anywhere. Oh my God, I'm gonna I'm gonna choose some place with the lifestyle that I've thought about was only a possibility when I retire.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take that opportunity now while the companies are still offering that opportunity. It's something that I don't think we fully know how that's gonna play out locally. You can just kind of assume and make a bet that it's probably gonna continue this drive for more housing in the southeast. And we've just got great land for it over here. I mean, these are beautiful tracts of land. You know, this little part of North Carolina has beautiful terrain. It's relatively dry property over there because it's been golf course land. And
I just heard that, I know this is a little aside, but I think it's also something that could play into the issues we're looking at, is that Amazon is going to put out 100,000 more distribution centers, which are going to require people who are going to need affordable housing. And I think that, I don't know if there's any going to be in our area at all, but that's a heck of a lot of them. They're going to be somewhere.
yeah, well, and that's something to look into too. And that's another misnomer you get when you talk about multifamily is look up what affordable housing really means. You know, it's not, you know, the worst case scenario that people like to think about. Affordable housing means that the folks that work at your restaurants, the folks that work at your grocery stores, you know, I know we grappled with this when I was working in Surf Cities, that the people that were working for the town couldn't afford to live in the city. You know, they were, you know, the property values went up so fast that there were only 3 of us that lived in the town. And that was only because we got in before the boom.
California is experiencing that now in Silicon Valley. They can't afford to live there. I mean, think about it, the simple way to think about it is that, you know, the 28% rule on housing. If someone's making $20 an hour, that's $40,000 a year. That means their housing cost should be $12,000 a year. That's $1,000 a month,
Right.
round numbers.
Not real.
Would be considered affordable.
Yeah.
So if
Right.
I just think about the house we started out in. I mean, I was teaching school, my husband is a printer.
Right.
And to me, that's affordable housing. It wasn't a mansion, it wasn't a
And I think-
fancy house, but it
so
was
my,
nice.
so
One was
my,
Artesia 3 bedrooms, I think are only going for $900 a month. Because they had to pay for it.
yeah,
I thought about it, that's not a bad idea. Maybe I'll get rid of my house and get rid of this lawn to take care of.
if you can qualify, you have to
Yeah.
qualify. You have to qualify to get into Arteza Village.
Yeah.
And to go back to what Sybil just mentioned too, just to give a great example, City of Wilmington, my friends just sold their house, and it was a cookie cutter starter home built in 1992. So you can kind of picture this 1,500 square foot single car garage. Every house in America built between 1985 and 1995. A guy bought it. It's his very first home. $265,000. Starter home. There's a real problem. That's why multifamily is being built everywhere.
Yeah, right.
People can't graduate college, get their first job, and work their way. You know, you're 2-3 jobs in nowadays before you can afford to get your first house. You know, I mean, $260,000. I mean, what's that payment? Probably $1,200, $1,300 a month, with including your escrow. Those are huge numbers. I mean, I bought, you know, we built our first house in 2001, and there's no way $260,000 was even on the table. So I don't. Since they sold that house, I've been thinking about affordable housing and what that really means, and it changed
So
my
that's why,
perspective.
like say in that case, it'd be nice to think about having the multifamily type housing. So even, let's say if we had a decent amount of multifamily, nowadays the people leaving the houses, let's say somebody's got their first job or that they can do online or whatever, and they can't afford a house in Sunset Beach, but they like the town, well, maybe they'll rent an apartment for 3 or 5 years until they build up their savings and their salary.
And buy a house.
And so you bring them in, attract them into the community because there is a starter so-called method, which may not be owning, it may be just renting for 3 years until you establish yourself. And then they think, okay, I can look around Sunset Beach, I love it here, I'll buy a lot and I'll build a house or whatever, so.
And-
It's a way into the town, and unfortunately, there's the way out of the town too at the end for us, but.
Sure. But there's an issue with the demographics. We are lopsided. It's not good for a good, solid, rounded, healthy community. That's a whole nother socioeconomic conversation. But, you know, to go back to cost of housing, I just read yesterday on the home builders, in the past 3 months, 4 months, maybe it's 4 months, maybe it's last quarter, lumber costs went up 14.7% in 4 months. Affordable housing is almost a misnomer. It's
Again, a lot of it's COVID related and the mills
Yes.
being shut down and da-da-da-da.
yeah. There's a lot. I mean, we ran into a problem here where we literally were having to cancel inspections because electricians couldn't get breakers. They could not get surge protector breakers because the factory in Mexico shut down.
Yeah.
To the,
I
your
think
point on
maybe
COVID.
something to impress on the council when you speak to them is, on the multifamily issue, is a way to orient ourselves that multifamily is an asset to the community, not a liability.
Well, and for 30 years it was. You know, I mean, honestly, until Arteza Village, I don't think there was real. Y'all have been here longer than I have, obviously. I don't remember multifamily ever being it was an asset to the golf courses. It was an opportunity for you to buy a house when you were my age, or buy a condo when you were my age in your mid-40s, and rent it out to the golf course package, and then you know, when you got to retirement age, you could settle into that, and you know, that's how multifamily was probably looked at here for years. Just the market has changed, and that is something that that whole issue, I don't know, there's no way to really tackle that through ordinances. That's a perception and education issue, and I don't know the right answer to give you or guide you to get the public there, and because a lot of the public, you're just not going to get there. The only thing that's gonna help the perception is for this to be successful. That's the only thing that's gonna work. The success of Arteza Village and it being an asset or just a non-existent property, basically, if you will, it just kind of disappears into the Sunset Beach background, is going to offer all the guidance you're going to need as far as educating the public as to how to handle your multifamily. I suspect it's going to disappear into the minutia back there, is my guess, based on all the phone calls we get for people who think that we're doing the leasing.
It's crazy.
I did learn the other day too, from talking to those folks, that 12 of those units have to be rented out to to veterans. So that was part of the funding source, was that it had to be the veterans. So people just don't take the time. Why would you take the time to educate yourself on Arteza Village? I mean, the general populace it's multifamily, done.
Well, you
Pass
know,
me the mashed potatoes.
it's really interesting because I wrote on when I went through this before we ever came, one of the questions is what is the history and what was the original intention of the district? Intentions change the society, and that's where I think we are.
Yeah, because that was what, 10, like I said, 10, 12 condo buildings over there? And that would, you all have, I've never seen the plans, but that's what everybody's,
Between the condos and the townhouses, that was all supposed to be built out. There's supposed to be a movie theater over there. It went to Shalot. There was supposed to be a hotel that was never built. I mean, that whole thing over there was supposed to, and then they were supposed to have like a continuing care community thrown in there. I mean, there were so many things that were supposed to be slated over there. None of it ever happened. That was the original plan over
the
there.
Bill Clark subdivision will be a big deal for the Mud District because, as you all remember, coming in right here, roughly, there's gonna be a road connection.
By the ABC store, right?
It's the road right there by the Mexican restaurant.
Right.
That
Stuff
road's
out
gonna
there.
get cut in, right there. So 363 homes are gonna have their own basically private driveway into the Mud District, which is huge for those commercial business owners. I suspect that once that actually happens and those houses get built, and that connection's supposed to get made during this first phase of development. I know Carolina Dreams has been working with Phil Norris to get those plans, the stormwater plans, amended to put that street in and get that connection in, which is going to be just a huge, absolute asset for the town. I think the benefits are going to be tremendous there. But you know, just you're going to start seeing things like that are going to facilitate more commercial, more restaurants, probably because of the demographic. of
All
folks
that
are
empty
moving.
property next to the existing, if that's all part of that, I didn't look close enough at that map. You know, like where the concerts used to be for 1 year. That whole, what is that lot?
That's a park. That was laid out as a park.
That is a town park?
private park for the community.
Yeah,
Oh.
and that's the town, use it for the town.
Correct, correct. Yeah, that was a designed park as a feature for all that multifamily that was originally developed there, which is the kind of stuff you want to,
Mhm.
you don't just want open space. Just open space is good. You want
Functional.
functional communal open space. You know, you want, when you build something like a Food Lion, or, you know, you have that backside where the Mexican restaurant, perfect example. You want to have that low rung wall between the street and the front entrance, not because you want the wall, but because it's a decorative feature and you can sit on it. It's technically a bench. You know, you want those kinds of features to be included into your development. Those are the kinds of things to ensure that your commercial really becomes part of blends perfectly with your residential. You know, so it all just kind of melds together and you don't even realize that you're in a commercial development. You're just in the neighborhood, so to speak. Anyway, I could talk about this.
Yeah,
kind
Can
of
I,
stuff
can
all
I
day.
suggest we move along? This was
I love it. I
designed to
could
be a
talk about this all day.
discussion, and I think we've had a good discussion. I think we're probably premature to think in terms of any priorities at this point, but maybe a month from now, when we have our next meeting, we'll have a little more information as to
Yes.
some of the direction coming from the council, and perhaps we can just revisit this and see
Absolutely.
what are our priorities to become.
But if you're gonna have a better idea after the town council meeting, should we wait a month? I mean, is this something we should start, it's gonna take time to do,
Just start right
and
away.
there's a lot going on, and maybe we should be more proactive. I mean, that's just my thought. Y'all know better than I do.
Maybe meet fairly soon after the council meeting and then use
And set up.
our meeting just based
We
on
can-
what
we
they
can-
say to
we can
come
meet
up
on
with
the-
our priorities.
How about we can do the first, meeting on the first. That'll,
Just make it priorities.
and then I can report back from that
Yeah.
meeting to you all. You know.
And then we,
That's October 1st and 15th are
Yep.
October meetings.
But we could get together on the first, and I could just, because that's the 22nd, I mean, that's just basically a week later.
Set
Why don't we get
priorities.
together on the first, and I can report back to it, we can set our priorities.
Yeah, okay, great, great.
And then on the 15th, Wes with the COG will be here, and he's gonna be presenting the updates to 160D. So all those state mandated updates that we have to make to the zoning ordinance. So let's meet on the 1st, talk about priorities, and then I can have something ready by November, because that October 15th meeting is going to be filled with all kinds of fun technical
Fun, yeah.
stuff from Wes. So I was hoping to get him on the 1st. It didn't work out.
Well, we just looked at it.
I blame my former employer for usurping us in the. They have money they have to spend by October 14th, so he bumped us. But yes, let's meet on the 1st. I'll report back. We'll set priorities, and then on the 15th, we definitely have the COG coming to talk. And that also gives us an opportunity, because Wes has a beautiful brain for this. We can pick his brain on a couple other things
Yeah,
if we have to.
while we're here.
Yeah, which I'm never afraid to do that. So if that works for y'all.
Okay. I think the other item for discussion today is standards for the mixed-use district. I think we kind of touched upon it a number of times this morning. I guess my initial thoughts were, number one, the UDO, amongst other things, is an informational document. When people are planning on developing, they have a source to go to that says, here's what I can do and here's what I can't do. And we have dimensional standards for every zone in the town other than the UDO. And I say, well, why is that different? The years that I've been on the planning board, I remember at least 3 occasions where we've had some proposed development in a mixed-use district. A couple of them were small Charleston-style homes, 20 person or 20 unit subdivision. And, the first question I ask is, well, what are we measuring it against?
Right.
Because we didn't have those dimensional standards. And while, Todd has talked in terms of the flexibility that we have, and flexibility is obviously a wonderful thing, but I wonder if that could come back and hurt you, in that if someone is proposing something that you would rather not see, do you have a sound basis for denying it? So those were
Sure.
my only thoughts, so.
This gets into probably what would work best for the MUD district would be switching it all over to conditional zoning, where they have the flexibility and every project basically becomes its own standalone set of ordinances, if you will. I'm sure you all have talked about this over the years. It's relatively popular these days, City of Charlotte's doing it exclusively now. I don't even know how they're keeping up with that. But the flexibility is huge, because it lets you do the things that you kind of want to see, the things that you like, that are pleasing to the eye. It lets you do it. I think the flexibility in the MUD district currently is a good thing. How to button that up so, like you said, we don't kind of get down the road later is. It's defensible now, because there are no setbacks. It's basically, it's a design district, basically, is the best way to look at it. It's meant to be a design-based district. Putting it into a more formalized process like a conditional zoning district requiring conditional zoning for anything in the MUD district might be the best way to go to ensure that, yes, it's flexible, but B, it's flexible until you come up with a plan, and then we lock you into this plan. And now future generations know what the rules were for this plan, and you have to follow that. Doesn't mean the next vacant piece of property in the MUD district has to follow that, but you know what your rules are and what they're locked into. Because right now we're beholden to the POA, and POAs are only as good as the people managing them.
Yeah, that was my other question, but the whole, Village of Sunset Beach Architectural Review Board, and, the interface that we have with them, and
which I think is just the Stewarts. I think. I honestly don't know who else is on the Architectural Review Board, but I'm pretty sure it's just the Stewarts.
Yeah. But anything being built in that area has to be approved by
Yes.
that architectural
Yes.
review board.
100%.
Yeah, and would that then say that any changes that we make, would potentially make to the UDO, would it have to go through them, or are we
No,
totally free to make what changes?
we can make whatever changes
Okay.
we want,
Okay.
whether or not,
So,
and if they don't want to adhere to them, they won't get a permit.
yeah. Okay. So no, yeah, I mean, again, this is another thing that just came off our project list, certainly not a priority, but, you know, those were just some of the questions I had in my mind, and I don't know that it's a priority to do anything with it at the moment.
Conditional zoning is probably the best route for that district, in all honesty. I think your biggest issue right now is new subdivisions and potential, and the overwhelming growth potential for the community. Because I think once we see these 3 neighborhoods really start going vertical, it's gonna look like a lot of change, obviously, and it's gonna be a lot of new folks coming to the community for more development. Most of it good, some of it probably not so much. But, you know, I would agree. We need to look at the bigger issues with the council as far as rezoning, hopefully form-based code, and what that all entails to ensure that those large tracts of land, because they could build the mud district out, and it's probably, based on the kind of zoning district that it is, it's probably gonna be all appropriate uses within there, dense, packed in, commercial, packed in, it's probably gonna be just fine. What happens in the MR3 district, in the MB1 district, those are real wild cards that the town ordinances really don't have a handle on. So I would agree, yes, mud down the hierarchy. Which if they choose to go with form-based code, all that gets cleaned up and it's all lumped into one nice little ordinance, which will just take time. So,
Do you have any comments? Any other comments?
I'm not going to talk
this morning.
Listen, I could talk about the development and styles and all that kind of stuff forever, but you know, no, I think everything's going good. You know, it's good to have you guys back here. I've missed everybody. Maybe that's why I'm talking all the time. But yeah, there is a lot going on. In Sea Trail, just to give you an update on what we've been seeing in there, is Riptide is holding up their end of the bargain as to what they said they were going to do. Dustin and I were out yesterday. You'll see a lot of mowing going on out there. I don't know if you noticed it across from Dollar General and stuff like that. They've purchased tons of new equipment. Hey, you might have seen it.
Probably have.
Probably have, but they bought a bunch of new equipment.
Oh, they did, oh. Well,
They bought a bunch of new equipment to maintain all the common area that they bought, and to start doing all the things Pan didn't do over the years as far as the stormwater system. They've already been in there. They're starting to replace pipes, clean out ditches, taking care of all of those items that had been neglected for the past 10 years, how long? 14 years, however long Mr. Pan's owned that property. So that's great. I mean, that's really good for those folks. So my conversations with the homeowners over there have been generally positive as to what they're seeing. So I think, fingers crossed, this is all good for the individual community and the overall town as far as that goes. So hopefully we'll see that continue. I think we will, because like I was telling you, so they are planning on building a temporary building for the maintenance and construction that they'll be doing over there.
It's all in my neighborhood.
That's all in Sipple's neighborhood right now. So they'll be putting a building up next to the maintenance facilities that are pre-existing in there for all that maintenance that they'll do. Because the whole end goal is to fix these stormwater systems, turn it over to the master association. So eventually it'll all be somebody else's permit, like it's supposed to. The second thing is that the real estate office, which is right there by the bottom of the bridge and the fire department, the little building that's kind of been tucked in there, you'll notice they've started cleaning, I don't know how often any of you go in Sea Trail, but if you go in there, you'll see that they've started cleaning up the landscaping in there as well.
Yeah.
They are going to completely redo that building. Since they are now the developer and declarant in Sea Trail, they can utilize that building as a temporary sales office. So they are going to rehab that building back to what it was originally, which was a sales office.
Oh, great.
So you will see that building get completely redone, and it won't just be a vacant.
Eyesore, that's the word.
Yeah,
I swear.
yeah. Where I think they just stored moldy paperwork for the past 20 years. But anyway, so there are some positive changes coming in there, and obviously all our other subdivisions. The burning is almost done, and which was all done with permits and legally. And then other than that, enjoy the real estate signs, because October 15th was the 30-day window for but prior to early voting. So you saw them all going out early the past couple days, all over the place. Anyway,
On the commercial side, did I recall that there was at some point somebody looking at the property between the Dollar General and the Coastal Living, whatever the stores?
yes,
Is
right.
that disappeared, or is that?
They still
Seemed like
own.
that was on the list and then disappeared?
Yes, it was. They were ready, going, moving until the middle of March. Haven't heard from them since.
Yeah.
They still own it, but I suspect they're just kind of
Wait and see.
wait and see right now. They're making their money on their building down there, and until there's a clearer picture as what's happening, there's probably no reason for them.
No other commercial development?
No, the pizza shop's supposed to be going in. What's his name? Joey O's? Joey O's. He's supposed to be going over here in Pelican Watch. But I don't think he submitted any permits. Talked to him several times. I know he signed a lease. And then the Backstreet Cafe location, somebody's supposed to be going in there as well.
Okay.
I think they're coming. Anyway, the Stewarts mentioned that that they showed it to somebody and that they had signed a lease for that as well. But as far as new construction, I think the gentleman who owns Fibbers had bought what's his name?
Richie?
Rich.
Yes, Rich Dobkin. I think he had bought that building and was going to turn it into some like 4 different uses. Going to put a real estate office in there. Bagel Docks was going to go in, but it looks like it's past couple months. It looks like it went back up on the market. I don't know if COVID slowed him down, or he just knowing him, he could have just moved on to another project. And
Which movie?
the old beach shop there next to the gas station.
Oh,
He came in
Yeah.
with concept plan.
I mean, he had a great concept plan.
Yeah, subdivided into 4, right?
Yeah, it was going to be great. It was going to be great. And the uses that he wanted to put in there were perfect.
Bagel dogs.
Well,
I think next year will be the year of commercial. You got to get this wave of residential.
well, plus all the commercial restrictions. It's
They-
pretty hard to stick your neck out and open a business when you don't know what's going to happen to it.
yeah, that it's
How many seats in your restaurant?
Right, I mean, you may say, okay, I can open it this way at 50%, and then next week a new order coming out saying, nope, sorry, 20%,
right.
right? So,
Until we get a clearer picture, I would say the second half of 2021 will probably we'll start seeing real commercial popping up. By then you'll have
houses built.
you'll have real houses over here. I know the Stewarts have already started marketing the village with all these new developments that are proposed. Once they start going vertical, it changes everything. The numbers will be there, the synergy, if you will. And then, like I said, that street that's going to interconnect to the sanctuary, from what they told me, they're gonna punch that street in, and then they'll be coming back with a plan to build commercial on both sides of that street, you know, or upstairs, downstairs, live work units again, kind of like they did over there where Fivers is and some of those gift shops. So it's coming. I think COVID actually slowed it down a little bit for us to a certain degree commercially, but residentially, we're just, anyway. There's a lot coming, just be prepared for it, and I think next year we'll be really, really busy with site plans.
We will be coming back next meeting or an upcoming meeting to our March 19th agenda that was canceled due to the virus. And we still have,
Landscaping,
we had the landscaping, preservation of
Fence
trees, and a
setbacks.
couple of small things, sidewalks.
yes. I'll start creeping those things back
Yeah.
into the fold because landscaping's pretty much ready to go.
Preservation of trees, I think we still had some
There were
discussion
some
with.
discussions on how to do the preservation of
Yeah.
trees.
And the reason I bring that up is that I think one of the things you'll probably hear about Tuesday is just clear cutting of trees. That was discussed at the last council meeting, very tail end of it. And, a question was raised, let's give the planning board a project to do something with that. And just something to ponder. I liked what I heard from the bird watch folks. We raised a question about what heritage trees are going to come out, and the answer was, we're only going to take out what we need to clear the road right away. And then we're going to clear the trees on the building lots on a lot by lot basis when we're ready to develop them. And I think that's a nice approach, as opposed to just going in and leveling an area like happened at the sanctuary. And it might be something to consider.
Well, they can do that. Sanctuary can't do that.
They what?
Sanctuary can't do that. They're a high-density project, and the state of North Carolina doesn't give you that option. You've got to completely regrade your site in North Carolina in order to meet the state stormwater requirements. That's why you see all these new subdivisions, instead of them just punching a road in. When they go to a high-density development, they've got to basically reshape that entire property to get all the water engineered.
Oh, okay.
That's the reason, because I've had this conversation with numerous builders and developers all the time. They're like, you can blame, they'll flat out tell you, blame the state. And if they go to a high density plan, which the sanctuary is a high density plan, they pretty much have to start dropping in all those pipes and all those ponds, and they've got to get all that water from Seaside Drive, has to go all the way back across the property and get regraded back to the middle of the property where the big stormwater pond is going. That's why you see it. It's a horrible, horrible, horrible practice. But it's the rules they are stuck with.
Okay, I didn't realize.
There are some things that we could potentially get into. But we need to get a consultant, because that's outside my
Perhaps we can do it
engineering
with
grade. I'm not gonna lie, because there are some really cool things. If you look up Demarest Forest, Demarest Village in Wilmington. It's a gorgeous single-family home neighborhood that is developed around the trees and the roads, and they use low-impact development techniques to do it. Look that one up, and look up Parkside in Wilmington. If you've ever been to Parkside, that's behind Mayfair.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful neighborhood. The houses are probably a little bit too big for what they were trying to pull off, but both very well done with stormwater. Demarest was done a little more low density, and Parkside was done a little more high density, but they use a lot of interesting techniques: back alleys, strip driveways, swales in the middle between the two single path roads to filtrate the stormwater. We'd have, if we look into it, take a look at it, it's really cool. I can bring someone in probably to talk to us about it, but it would be a much more technical document than I'm certainly capable of writing for that. You definitely need an engineer for that one. But yes, there are things you can do, and when they're done and they're done well, they're amazing.
Good. Anybody have anything else? Do we have any public comments? Pete?
He just woke up.
Okay. If not, motion to adjourn?
Also moved.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.